Let's go with this one. Let's go with this one for now. We can make this bigger. I don't know what this is about. How you guys doing? All right, we got a few people trickling in. How's everybody doing? Let me get my multi-stream chat up, see if you guys are saying anything. I know there's a little bit of a delay anyways, but yeah. So tomorrow's Veterans Day. So today I wanted to talk about that, or kind of dance around that theme anyways. The question, I guess, about it is, oh, hey, thank you. Appreciate you. Sarah, are you here? So, I have a lot of questions and feelings about this. I'm a 20-year veteran. And I kind of came in the military like on the wake of the 9/11 stuff and everything. I know one of the big things actually that inspired me to join was when Pat Tillman joined. It was like a big news story and all that. And I don't know, now looking back, I kind of equate myself to this like Charlie Sheen type character in Platoon, where I joined a little later. I was 25. And so I really more so wanted to do it. There's a lot of factors like job security and college and all that stuff. Everybody thinks about that stuff. But I really felt like it was a good opportunity to do something, good for the world. I felt like a sense of like pride and patriotism and, just I kind of bought into that whole image of, we're going around and we're doing good things and, helping people out and, building infrastructure and, raising the rest of the world up. And then when I got in there, obviously there's a lot of challenge and adversity and things that like you don't really get. They show that stuff in the movies, but it's way different. It's way different. It's a big mess. It's definitely not as structured and squared away as people make it out to be in the movies. There is a lot of planning and there is a lot of that stuff like good order and discipline and focus on those kind of things, but overall the whole thing is just kind of like McHale's Navy type of thing, especially the Navy probably. I don't know, I can't speak for the other branches, but from what I've heard by comparison, the Navy is a little more I don't know, complicated. But yeah, anyways, so after I joined, I saw that, especially working my way up, once you get up into the senior enlisted ranks, you go to a lot more briefs, you get a lot more big picture view of what's going on. And I don't know, I got disillusioned pretty quick. Not just with the internal culture. There's a lot of that stuff, like the toxic leadership stuff and the abuse of power stuff and all that, which is, if you guys want to talk about that, I'm super down to talk about that. I've talked about that a lot with other people. I think it weighs heavy on the mental health conversation. But I wanted to start off with the Pat Tillman thing, because he's a person who really inspired me to join the military in the first place. He was an NFL professional football player for the Arizona Cardinals. He quit. He got out of his NFL contract to go to join the Army Rangers. And, of course, the media jumped all over that, like in the pro-war effort. And it's like, oh, look, American hero. And he pretty quickly kind of did the same thing that I did. He joined a little bit before me. He joined about 3 years before me. But he started kind of criticizing the military in general for not really being what they portray themselves to be. For example, one of the things that he complained about was he was involved in the rescue of a private that was supposedly taken captive by the Saddam Hussein's forces, Private Jessica Lynch, and he was part of the extraction team that went to rescue her. But he said that when they went there to liberate her from this hospital, they had to wait for hours. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours. He said they had to wait for a news crew to show up. So in the United States, on the news, they sensationalized this story as like this heroic rescue, and they went in and fought all these bad guys and killed bad guys, and rescued her from being held captive by these Islamic extremists and stuff. But that's not what really happened. From his story, he said that there was nobody guarding her. She was just in a hospital, in a civilian hospital, because she had been injured. And all they did was, pick her up and take her out of there. But they edited this news footage, and I think it was dark too. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not 100% sure on this, but just remembering, I might be mixing it up with something else, but I remember them having like night vision stuff going on the videos and everything. And anyways, he just kind of started seeing through some of that stuff. But then he also started reading Noam Chomsky and agreeing with a lot of what Noam Chomsky had to say about manufactured dissent and, control of the narratives, and just like a lot of the stuff people are still talking about today, like this dishonesty in the media, and like the government's lying to you about stuff. And I know a lot of people feel that they're vindicated in some sense from that by certain politicians and stuff saying that, like, oh, the news is like all bullshit, and, the media is all contrived, and there's some truth to all of this stuff, but I don't think it's just the mainstream media. Like, for sure, the mainstream media is captured by these like big corporate interests, which is what all this stuff is really about. We talk about this a lot on this channel, but this corporate capture of the American political machine, and like the whole thing that they're doing with the military too, the imperialism and stuff. So when people tell me like, thank you for your service, I feel really honored and grateful for that. I feel like I did make a sacrifice, but I also feel some kind of like grief and like pain over it, because I feel like a lot of times my understanding of that, what that entails, isn't maybe what they think it is, And I'm not meaning to like dismiss anybody else's experience. I know there's a lot of other people in the military that have different experiences than me, and people who have like a lot more direct combat experience, and that's a whole different kind of potential trauma and mental health struggle and stuff that comes along with that. But I kind of feel like that I resonate with Pat Tillman a lot on his disavowal of the military machine and the media machine, kind of painting this picture of us being these like good guys going around the world and helping everybody out. And while in reality, and I got to kind of experience some of this stuff firsthand. There is a lot of that. You see that facade of like the glad handing people, and there's a lot of hidden foreign aid in the military too. A lot of people in politics, they always complain about foreign aid and like, don't give money to other countries. We got to fix American problems first. And I'm not taking a side on that right now. I'm just saying sometimes, one time we went to, it was either Thailand or Indonesia. And I saw some of the receipts. I was friends with some of the supply guys on the ship, and they put like some oil cans, some like emptied out 55-gallon drums with, chained together. They strung them around the ship, and they charged us for, it might have been part of the Fat Leonard, that whole scandal, but because it was Southeast Asia and during that time. But they charged us $400,000 a day for that for 3 days. So that's like over $1 million, just to put some like oil barrier, like security barrier they called it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff too, but it's like a way of the way that they talked about it too. I even asked those guys, like, isn't that crazy? And the supply chief was like, yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but it's they know they're doing it. It's like they're basically like gifting money to that country, to that economy of that small town or whatever, and they see it as like a building relations, foreign relations thing. So while there's a lot of that stuff going on, it's not just like out of generosity. It's, we want to build up our presence there. We want them to be sympathetic to our causes and let us more into their country. And, there's like a whole philosophy of geopolitics that goes into that, where it's kind of just, they call it realism, that it just says like, that's the way it is. It's like a dog eat dog world, and you have to, we have to do this stuff, or else, we're going to lose because somebody else is going to do it instead. And that is kind of what happened after 9/11. The xenophobia stuff kicked in, and we cut a lot of foreign aid, and who stepped in to fill the void, and building schools and hospitals in all these other countries. Spoiler, China, and I don't know to what extent Russia was involved in any of that. Probably not as much. I didn't hear much about it anyways, but I know China has been and continues to be really proactive in that kind of stuff. They're basically doing the same thing. It's like following our playbook, the United States playbook, trying to, do some infrastructure projects, but okay, you have to let us build a military base here. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, which in itself, those aren't bad things, And like if you're taking that realist view, it's like that's just how it works, right? Tit for tat, quid pro quo, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't know how many of y'all ever seen that movie Platoon. My two favorite movies about the military are Platoon, obviously. I've brought it up a few times, and Jarhead. Like I think those really capture the military pretty well. Platoon is all obviously like dramatized, and it's in a time in history that a lot of us weren't around for during the Vietnam War. But just that whole kind of concept of him, they're showing like a more benevolent, supportive, like caretaker boss that's trying to like protect his people, and that's the more of the kind of leader I was. And then you have the other guy, the more like typical authoritarian, like let's just kill all these motherfuckers type of guy. Oh shit, I can't say that on YouTube. I forgot. But and then he's kind of like caught between them as it's almost like a mother-father relationship or something, or like a nurturant parent versus strict parent type of relationship that he's caught between. But I don't want to spoil it for you what happens if you haven't seen it. But he becomes pretty disillusioned with his he joined later too. He was like a college student. He left college to go fight in the Vietnam War, and he pretty quickly figured out it wasn't defending freedom and democracy around the world. Yeah, it was pretty messed up what was happening over there. And I feel like it's the same story now. It's really just the same thing. It's like the corporate capture of the government has progressed to an extent where it's just like the military is being used to promote their interests around the world. And it's sad that we get put through the ringer and do all this self-sacrifice. I mean, I know we get rewarded in certain ways with like good health care and some college benefits and whatnot, but yeah, it really messes a lot of people up. Like the stats, we should probably look into that. I could have done that before this, I guess. Looked up some stats on like the percentages of, people with mental health issues in the military and compared to civilian population. Yeah, for sure, Paul. It's the way I've come to see it over all this time, just paying attention to, multiple media sources and my experience within that system, within the military itself, and kind of being privy to some of these like inner workings at a higher level. I wasn't like anywhere like in chiefs of staff level or anything like that important, but as a senior enlisted, you get to be into some briefs and like you get secondhand information from some of these conversations that are going on about strategy and whatever. It's a little closer to the pulse of that stuff than a lot of people. But just putting all the jigsaw puzzle pieces together, it kind of has led me to this picture of the military being used as a tool to bully other ideological blocks, other cultures and other power bases around the world into going along with our program or suffering. And a lot of our own people are suffering and dying from it themselves, and that's to me, like, my opinion, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it to end up with PTSD or end up an amputee or something like that for that. And I'm sure there's people that have that don't agree with that. They still believe that it's like for a worthy cause and like some noble patriotic duty, which I don't mean to take away from that or like throw dirt on that or whatever. I'm just saying I think there's more going on than that. That's like kind of the propaganda side of things. And I can see how you would believe that too if you're in this like us versus them mentality, where it's like, if you're not with us, you're against us, and if we don't win, then they do, and then it's going to be worse for us, so we have to beat the shit out of them. But then again, that's I feel like that is kind of the mentality that the military attracts in general. When I most of the people that join are really young, and they're kind of in that Ayn Rand, like Ron Paul libertarian phase, like seeking independence, and they're like, especially young men are like real aggressive and like I don't regret joining, but it's definitely a never meet your heroes situation. What do you mean by that, Alexandria? The motivation can be noble even if the cause might not be. For sure, Paul, yeah. That's kind of what I was saying. I feel like my motivations to join started out as noble, and then I just started, after I kind of saw what was going on, I really just didn't feel good about myself, like being a part of it anymore. And it caused a lot of, in addition to some of the shitty things I had to deal with, like the toxic leadership stuff and some of the shit, I just gotta stop saying bad words. YouTube really doesn't like it when you do that. But I feel like once I became a little disillusioned, even though I had the golden handcuffs, I had my kids I had to take care of, and it was really scary for me to think about getting out, because I was like, how am I gonna support my family? It just caused a lot of inner turmoil for me. It was like, man, I just I don't feel good about doing this. And I really tried to without necessarily like evangelizing or like propagandizing my people that worked for me, I just really tried to take care of them and kind of be that like that Willem Dafoe figure from Platoon with my people. But so what can we do to stop this? Not saying we should have an uprising, but can you do a military strike if we all just stop wanting to fight other people's ego wars? Yeah, I see what you mean, Sarah. It would be great to organize a general strike on that level. We've talked about that on this channel before, about kind of like, especially in the work up to the election, how voting is not going to do it. A lot of people feel like they're doing some kind of like revolutionary act, like by checking a box on a ballot, but that can never fundamentally change. Well, I don't want to say never, but at least as things are now, it cannot fundamentally change the underlying structure that like gave rise to these problems in the first place, you know. So we have to do something more, something else. So one of the things that we've talked about is organizing in that way to do some kind of like general strike stuff to kind of make an impact and hit them where it hurts. Now, I've seen a lot of debate about that in some circles about like protesting is not very effective. Like it might raise some awareness, but it doesn't really, as far as the companies and the people that are propagating all this stuff go, it doesn't really like affect them that much. And strikes, on the other hand, do. So that's like the more effective of the two horns there. But for the people who are interested in that stuff, there's so much like infighting and indignation and like these witch hunts and identity politics stuff going on. They've been infiltrated so badly that it's really hard to get people to organize. So that's really what this project is all about. The political theory project and the community building stuff that we're doing is trying to cultivate and grow a group around mutual inquiry and open dialogue and talking about these things, and like not that we have to come to a consensus agreement on every single thing. We in fact like we shouldn't agree on everything. We need to have other viewpoints. Like that's part of the whole like strength and diversity thing, but we do need to be able to disagree without hating each other and without like trying to excommunicate each other or like say you're not a true one of us or whatever, what everybody's doing these days. Drones changed the whole thing. What do you mean, Paul? Like spying on, you mean like them getting like aerial view on protesters and stuff? Or are you talking about warfare itself? I've seen a lot of those videos of stuff going on in the Ukraine and people getting taken out with like drones dropping bombs and stuff. That's pretty insane, man. Like, I remember feeling like viscerally terrified watching one of those videos where a guy was like running away from a drone. Yeah, man. It's kind of giving me like goosebumps thinking about it right now. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the military itself is like using a lot of they have a lot of, yeah, dude, that shit was crazy, right? Damn, I said it again. The military itself has a bunch of like anti-drone tech, to shut them down, like when they're flying. It's like, radio frequency interruption stuff, like signal jamming stuff. But, other than that, like, I don't really know, man. What do you guys think? Like, it's an interesting piece of the puzzle that you bring it into the... Let me see if I can... Oh, there we go. Yeah, the drone stuff is pretty wild. Yeah, I think it's just it's a strange institution, It's like there's a lot of pros and cons, and like you get kids when they're really young. They're still developing they talk about your frontal lobe's not fully developed till you're around 26 or something. So you're really getting kids, if they join when they're 17, 18 years old, you're getting them at a very like formative stage. So you can have a lot of positive or negative impact on them. And one of my first kind of crosses to bear that I took up when I first joined was I saw just a lot of just really bad leadership and a lot of people that were kind of basing their leadership style on this kind of like I don't know what I want to call it, like a superiority complex stuff. I don't know. It's just so like childish in a way. And I don't know. So I kind of started developing my style to more like guiding and coaching and, helping people develop good mindsets and like, what are you doing? But in the process of that and in the process of my own growth, I, I got to this point where I found that like my values and my big dreams in my life and my passions and it just didn't align, you know, with the organizational stuff. Even though a lot of the organizational stuff, like they say that's what it's about, and then it turns out it's really similar to, you know, what the government in general does in politics and all that. But yeah, for me, it definitely led into mental health issues. You know, like I know that it was like one of the buzzwords of what was it, like 2022 or whenever that was, like the word of the year, the gaslighting. But I really feel like that's kind of what was going on with me. It was like group gaslighting. It was like I really started to question my own worldview and my own like sense of sanity and reality. It's like, man, do I just have it all wrong, man? Am I like, you know, is like kindness and compassion and empathy just like useless? Or, you know, I don't know. I think I was going through some times of like, you know, really figuring out how to set hard boundaries and all that kind of stuff. Because I was like, I was one of them really when I joined. I was like a type A, very assertive. I wasn't like an asshole, but I just felt like I said it again. I said a bad word again. I wasn't like a jerk like that, but I guess I probably came across that way to a lot of people. But I just, back then when I was in my 20s, I believed the best way to help people was to just give them a good example of what to do and like tell them, you know, just try harder, you know, and that it definitely didn't work with a lot of people, because a lot of folks, and I found this out later when I experienced it myself, like it's not that easy sometimes to just feel better. You have to like work through stuff and process stuff and, you know, heal from stuff. And it's very privileged to be able to say like, just, you know, just feel better, just get better. Because if you're able to say that, like you've either already healed, or you don't have stuff to heal from, or you know, you're like suppressing that stuff to a point where, you know, you're like projecting onto other people. But what's up, Jupiter? No, it's all good, man. You're right on time. You showed up exactly when you meant to. Yeah, there's a lot of that. But you know, like I said earlier, there's a lot of combat related PTSD stuff, you know, when you see some of that stuff, or like friends of yours get. Yeah, I agree, Sarah. I'm not like anti using those words. It's just YouTube, like sometimes they don't, they're, you know, they'll shut my channel down if I say too many bad words. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah. So I can't really speak on that because I didn't have that kind of trauma, but I did have other stuff, you know. Like I lost some friends to, you know, unaliving themselves from their experience in the military. And hey, Justice, never perceive you as a jerk. Within the structure of the military ranking, people let the power get to their heads, and I noticed that you didn't ever act that way. I always appreciated that. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because you know, it makes me feel like, yeah, I wasn't crazy, because I feel like maybe I was one of the only people, at least at that place where I met you, that had that kind of view. But I do, I would say, like, yeah, I'm talking about before, when I was on the ship and when I first joined. You know, it took me a little while because my ex-wife, she was struggling with some mental health stuff too, and I didn't really get it either back then. I was doing the same thing to her, like, just get better, you know, like, what, everything's fine now, you're safe, everything's good. Stop being afraid to order pizza or whatever. So I wasn't as empathic and compassionate as I could have been, and it took me a little while to learn that. I mean, it really hit me pretty hard once I started struggling with that stuff myself. But yeah, I do appreciate you saying that, Justice. And, going through that stuff with her, that whole struggle, that really shifted my thinking a lot. I was also in school at the time, in college, for philosophy. So I couldn't make my, like, Ron Paul libertarian worldview match up with some of my, my ethics and my beliefs about, like, how other people should be treated and taking care of other folks. So, I shifted kind of more into, like, what we talk about here is like this distinction between modernist and postmodernist worldview. So I moved kind of more into the postmodernist stuff before I met you. So thankfully so, or else I might have been one of those. I might have been one of those typical guys. But something I really started thinking about a lot with the toxic leadership stuff was like just how much that kind of stuff costs the military itself, like the hidden toll on individuals, not just due to like job stress and combat exposure, but just having to deal with terrible bosses. And this is something that's like not limited to the military at all, but I think maybe it's more the culture is like more conducive to it there. You know what I mean? Like the cultural norms and like the things that they value, like assertiveness and aggressiveness and those kind of things. And like, giving it to people straight. And I read so much leadership literature and organizational leadership stuff. There's something, one of the most popular guys, John Maxwell, talks about a lot is candor and care. And candor, he explains, he distinguishes that as like basically that, tell people like it is, like be frank and honest and upfront with them. Don't like sugarcoat stuff or whatever. But he also says, he talks a lot about care and like you have to do both. But I think, the tendency in the military leadership is to emphasize one over the other and sometimes forget about the whole care part. Another way I used to say it a lot was, they talk about tough love sometimes. And it's like they just do the tough part, but not the love part. It's really funny. You don't know what you know until you know. No need to dwell. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I am. As painful as all that stuff was, I'm glad I had those experiences and those growth opportunities to get beyond all that because, what we talk a lot about here is this kind of developmental worldview where it's, I think these people feel like this is like the most progressed, advanced kind of state of thought in humanity right now, where it's like instead of looking at these different views as, it'd be easy to look at those guys that are stuck in that like, alpha male mentality or whatever as like these guys are just wrong and they're terrible and they're the ones screwing it up for everybody. And like that, from one perspective, that seems right. It's like it's kind of hard to argue with that when we're talking about this stuff, like how they're, stepping on people and causing these mental health problems and causing these, SI and, people unaliving themselves and alcohol problems and all this stuff is like way higher in the military because of that. But at the same time, the developmental view is that, because I was saying I was there when I joined and I grew and progressed through that. So like they look at it as like these stages of emotional maturity, basically, that we all go through. And it's really like finding ways to invite people to progress through those stages. And I feel like the military is probably, as an institution, is not to sing the praises of big tech or corporate leadership at all, but they're probably about 50 years behind them, as far as like implementing some of the strategy. I used to talk about that a lot there because I would teach leadership courses. And I don't know if anybody even ever got it, but I would kind of like sometimes throw little ironic remarks in there about like, because a lot of people, their big hang up about going to those leadership classes were like, oh, this is the kinder, gentler military and we're getting soft and like this is all, like weakening us. And So sometimes I would tell the classes, like, well, think about this, like the reason Motorola made Six Sigma, like, and the reason that, these companies, the reason that they fund all this research into leadership methodologies and, management structuring and all that, the reason they do that isn't necessarily because they just want to make the world a better place and take better care of their workers. They realize that when people are happy and inspired to do their job, they do more and they do a better job. So they're, again, it's like the same thing. It's like a tit for tat quid pro quo thing. So that's why they do it. It's, if you think about it in that way, it's not really the aim, the cause of it isn't so noble. The same thing I was saying about the military itself and what they're doing to the rest of the world in general. Oh, thanks, Jupiter. I appreciate the 20 stars. Yeah, for sure. Like, there's a cool video I used to show them. We developed this curriculum. It was really cool, the backstory, and I don't want to like bore you guys with all of that, but it's cool how like some group of people came together and developed this thing because they saw a need for it, because the Navy like didn't have a lot of leadership stuff. They had gotten rid of it. So they kind of stood this thing up in the San Diego area, which is a huge area for the Navy. And we used to show this video in there. It was like from a book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And he talks about that in that book, how, people think that money's like the main driver and you have to like offer financial reward and pay people better to motivate them. And that's like a super old, like the carrots and sticks philosophy is like an old way. It's not like up to date with human, psychology and how motivational theory actually works. What we found or whatever through, the past decades. He was saying that, he's citing his studies and whatever, but he was saying that basically what you're saying, Jupiter, humans are naturally, they want to contribute to something, bigger than themselves. And they want to feel like they're getting better at something, they're improving over time, and they want to feel appreciated. So like once you give people enough money to where they just don't have to worry about, if they're going to be able to afford groceries or their kids are going to, die if they get sick, then it puts people's minds at ease enough to where they can focus more on whatever they want to do for their work. And work doesn't necessarily have to be like contributing to the GDP. It can be like creating art or like whatever, like I don't think that folks these days, man, they focus so much on like that it has to be some kind of like pragmatic, practical thing that we're engaged in all the time. But really, like my view on all that stuff is that we're just here to like live our lives and enjoy our time here with each other. Like if you go too far in that direction, you just ruin it, like have fun. Like what are we even doing? What are we doing, man? It's like spreadsheets and Excel and all that. Yeah, I mean, at some point, it might be necessary, or helpful. But if we're just like killing each other with PowerPoint meetings, man, it's just miserable. But yeah, I'm sure that like weighs on some people's mental health too. It did for me. Like I just remember sitting in some of those meetings, like, oh my God, man. We did this one brief one time that was like all day, right? They were talking about like, it was kind of a thing. It was like a contingency thing where they're like, okay, if China does this, we're going to do this, if, whatever. And this dude went through this whole brief for like 2 hours about like, if China invades Taiwan, this is what's happening. And our unit was involved, right? So at the end, he had like a slide that had like manning, logistics stuff, and a timeline that was like, it had a legend. It had 3 colors. It had green, yellow, and red. And green was like good to go. Yellow was like they're okay, but they're going to be delayed by whatever, less than 6 weeks or something. I don't remember, and the last one was like no, they can't. At their current manning and like equipage, they can't. Meet this plan. Every single unit listed on there was red. And I was like, dude, what? He was like, and this dude was so weird too. He kept pointing with his finger like this, like, he would point at the screen like with his little pinky finger. It was so weird. But he was like, so what does this mean? Can we execute this plan? No, we cannot. I was like, dude, what? Why do we sit through like a 2-hour brief on it? I leaned over. My boss was sitting right next to me. I was like, sir, I for one welcome our new Chinese overlords. And he started laughing. He's laughing about it. And he was like, yeah. He's like, you know what's funny about that, man? I think there's probably a couple Chinese guys over in China right now getting a brief like this saying, man, we are fucked, dude. Yeah. Spirit fingers or whatever you want to call it. Oh, gosh. But, yeah. Yeah, that is right, Jessica. That's like, that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's like McHale's Navy more than, some of these serious military movies that they make where everything's like structured and squared away and like they know everything and they're all on point all the time. It's like, it's a fucking mess, dude. Right, yeah, they talked to us about that too, Paul. Yeah, for sure. They, that's why they do the knife hand, because it's less like accusatory and aggressive than this, supposedly. But, let me tell you, those folks in the military find a way to make this very threatening. You're supposed to, in instructor school, they tell you to point like with like an upward kind of like, here, look at this thing. It's crazy, man. I mean, I know people have like, that's like, it's part of that psychology research stuff and whatever, but I don't know. It's funny. It's funny like teaching that stuff to like 26-year-old kids. Yeah, it's true, Tiffany. I feel like the guys who inspired me the most, and it might be different for other people, some people look to history and like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and Marcus Aurelius and stuff, and it's, like we don't even really know what those people were like, honestly. But I feel like for a lot of us, most of the people I talk to, and the ones who inspired me the most are like the Dr. King, Mandela's, the humanitarians, and something that they seem to implicitly understand is that you have to like care about other people. You like genuinely, one of my favorite Nelson Mandela stories, and I don't even know, I've tried to find it, and I don't know if it was from a book or where I came across it, but it was a story about him. It was told by the guy who was like going to meet with him. He was some kind of diplomat or politician or whatever, and he went to meet with Nelson Mandela, and he had a driver. A driver had drove him there, and Nelson Mandela was, like shook his hand and was greeting him, and come on, like they were gonna eat dinner or something, and he started walking towards the house, and Nelson Mandela just didn't follow him, and he said, what's up with that guy, the driver? And he was like, oh, that's just the driver, like just whatever. And he was trying to like blow him off, and he was like, no, we like let's invite him in, and he like made it a point to treat the driver as like a human being just as important as all of them, And to me, those are the best kind of people to follow. Those are the kind of people I want to follow. I want to make a dance out of that hand movement. Oh, that would be funny. My husband just finished instructor school, and the rules of instructing are so bizarre. Yeah, it's funny. They have, I don't know what they call it now. It was called JIT for a while, Journeyman Instructor Training, and then they changed it to like NITC or Navy Instructor Training Course, I think. I don't know what it is now. They changed that shit as much as they changed fucking uniforms, which is another bullshit thing, like money grab thing. It's like Admiral so-and-so retires, and then like let's do this deal. I just started this company and like do this deal with me so I can make a bunch of money. It's like good old boys club shit. And you know, an NT made that bullshit. Yeah, I'm sure they mean well. Like, I learned a lot of cool stuff in those classes. I had read some too from college. Like, one of my first college classes I ever took was about that. It was about like learning styles and stuff. It's really interesting. They talk about a lot of the same stuff in that school, but it's like a crash course, you know. But some of those things really made sense and they stuck with me. You know, like they talk about one thing about like your levels of understanding, where it's like your basic level is just memorization. You know, kids will like memorize material just so they can pass a test, but they don't really understand it. And you know, it eventually builds up into this level of, you know, philosophical understanding, which is what a PhD is supposed to reflect. It's like, oh yeah, Paul, have a good night, man. Thanks for stopping by. So the PhD is supposed to reflect like you understand that subject to an extent where you can not only relate it to other ideas and like see where it nests into this whole like web of ideas, but you can also like build upon it. You know, you can like advance the theories that are at the current like cutting edge of that realm of knowledge or whatever. And that's like the highest level of understanding. So, oh, there's good stuff in there, but yeah, some of it's like really, it seems really weird when you're like, you know, point like this, and when you try to actually implement it without, I don't know, it's hard to do that stuff naturally without like being a weirdo robot. You know, you really have to practice that stuff and be like, you have to be good at it to, you know, if you feel awkward, they probably feel awkward, basically. But yeah, let's get out of that rabbit hole. I wanted to talk about, I mean, whatever you guys want to talk about, that's cool. I had a couple other things on the outline, you know, like we were talking a little bit about mental health before we went into some of that stuff, but you know, if you guys want to talk more about that, we can. I also wanted to talk about like just hierarchy, structural problems, and like, you know, in the Navy, they have this performance evals. Let me see if I can pull this. Let me see if I can pull something up here. There's something that Mark Fisher talks about, and I might have a. I might even have it saved somewhere. If not, I can just kind of give the rundown of it. But he basically talks about how, you know, there was this promise in liberal democracy and this whole like economic system of freeing us from bureaucracy that was like the USSR basically, in the Cold War, all that stuff, those like kind of leftist ideas were portrayed as being like overly bureaucratic and inefficient. And there is something to talk about there with the economic stuff and the whole like distribution problem is what they call it. Like, how do you get the right things to the right places on time without like making people wait around? And I think we have like significantly advanced algorithmic, you know, systems, AIs and stuff that could figure that stuff out without, you know, the supply and demand economy figuring it out for us. But all that aside, Mark Fisher talks about how corporate culture is not anti-bureaucratic. It's not like super efficient. Actually, what it does is it tends to evaluate us on metrics that are more qualitative than quantitative. And to do that, they create these like these false metrics that, you know, you're trying to measure like somebody's integrity or somebody's loyalty or somebody's work ethic by like putting these little measures of this or that in place, like how many units or how many sales or how whatever, so that people at work, their mentality starts to shift more from doing the actual job and doing the work and being good at what we're supposed to be good at towards the report itself. Like, what are you getting evaluated on, and how can you like massage and like, you know, manipulate this reporting system. And that's pretty much like a good, that's a good, that paints a good picture of what the military is like. And especially as you move up higher, you know, the a lot of the conversation around advancement and, you know, ranking up or like getting accepted into certain programs and stuff is all about like hitting the wickets for that program or hitting the, you know, checking the boxes that are necessary to move to that next level. You know, and it's really nuanced and strange, but it's like that's what the job becomes about. It's like more about perception than actually being that thing. And like, I've been thinking about this the whole time that we've been talking about this. There's this dialogue I really love from Cicero called On Friendship. And it might seem like it has no relation whatsoever to any of this stuff we've been talking about, because he's talking about friendship, right? And there's some really good conversations in there about like flattery and what a real friend is and everything. But one of the things that it's kind of somewhat related to like the Aristotle level of friendship, you know, because Aristotle has a thing where it's like, I think it's like 3 levels, where he says like the lowest level of friendship is like use. You know, it's a tit for tat, like quid pro quo thing. Like I get something from you and you get something from me, and that's why we're friends, because we help each other with stuff and like we're useful to each other. And then the second level, I think, is, I can't remember what the Aristotle's explanation of that one is right now off the top of my head. I'd have to look. But the highest level for him is like you actually care about each other and like love each other and you want each other to do well, like no matter what. And that's kind of what I was saying about, like that none of these like employers or institutions or organizations do. They have more of a tendency to treat us like the lowest way, like we're robots or machines or we're just there to do a job or whatever. And the military definitely does that to people. And I think it's like, as far as the leadership stuff goes, it's a lack of education and understanding, you know? I mean, it might also have a lot to do with, you know, their upbringing and like emotional, developmental issues of these people, but I don't think it's something that's like an irreconcilable problem. And that's kind of what we were talking about with the developmentalist approach to all of it. Friendship's a degree of love, like hate is the on the other spectrum of love, temperature of likeness. Love, yeah, for sure. That's kind of what they're talking about in the Cicero dialogue. He kind of gets to the same point of that Aristotle did about like the highest level of friendship and what a true friend is. Like a true friend, kind of, they're not going to just flatter you. They're going to, you know, tell you. They're going to have candor with you and tell you like what the real deal is. You know, if you have like black mark on your face, they're going to tell you. But there's one part in there that really like stuck out to me. I had it engraved on, like, I don't have it in here or else I would show you guys, but I had it engraved on a thing that one of my friends made for me. And he basically says during that conversation of I think it's like when they're talking about the flattery stuff, he says, "Few are those who wish to be endowed with virtue rather than to merely seem to be." And I remember reading that when I was young, like, and just that part just like it got burned into my soul, you know. I love it when that happens, when you come across something like reading and it's just like, man. But I never forgot that. And I think even like some political, like civic groups and stuff have used some version of that in their like motto. I found out later, but you know, you get the point. It's basically saying like there's a lot of pretender people who just want to put on like a nice face and smile at you and pretend like they're your friends, or you know. And I see that a lot. I saw that a lot in military leadership also. You know, that what we were talking about some of these like ideals and virtues and like, you know, we're here to do good things. Like we're here to help people in the world, and this like high-minded Charlie Sheen, like moralist stuff, like reasons why people join the military. That stuff is all through, all the levels in the Navy, in the Chiefs Mess, the senior enlisted stuff. They talk about that stuff in Chief Season, like what you're really trying to do and what kind of person you're supposed to be. And from my perspective, it seemed like a lot of people just they kind of they're content with being perceived as such, but like don't really question what it actually means to be that, and don't really like strive to be that. So I think that bleeds over, that affects like the people that you're in charge of, and there's just a lot of abuse of authority. When I was when I was at this one certain place, I don't know if a lot of you have heard stories about this stuff, but like I heard stories about this coming up through the military about like prostitution rings and selling drugs and that kind of stuff. And I was like, how can this even happen here? How can this and sure enough, I ended up at a place where that happened. Oh yeah, I said that in Chief Season, right, Lou? Like I feel like you guys are intentionally misinterpreting what I'm saying. Yeah. But yeah, that place, that stuff was going on, and I didn't even know until later because I reported. It was really a big deal. Like the report that I made caused a lot of blowback, like whistleblower retribution stuff for me, and another woman there who I didn't even know filed the report at the same time as me. She was the command legal officer. And I lost a really good friend too because of all that, who was like privy to some of the information that, she's basically not supposed to be sharing this information with me because it's protected in a way. And she didn't really explicitly say it. She just kind of said like something like, when I was talking about like some of my suspicions, she said, man, I wish I could say something, because I know things. And that was enough for me. That was enough of an explanation for me to make a report. But I feel like that she kind of maybe felt betrayed by that, like, because she could get in trouble if it came back on her that she had like said something she's not supposed to say. So anyway, she stopped talking to me after that. But long story short, I had a young girl who was working for me. We had a young man who had recently unalived himself. So they decided they wanted to start getting reports on like risk factors for some of the people that were working for us. If they were going through a divorce, or they were in counseling, or they, had a death in the family or something like that. So they wanted to know these things. So we were putting these reports together every month. And after a few months, there was some back and forth with this girl. It was like, oh, she's fighting with her husband. They're getting a divorce. Okay, they're going to marriage counseling. Oh, no, now they stopped going to counseling. They're getting a divorce again, right? So I'm sending these reports up. Well, this guy who was he was pretty high up in the food chain, he was seeing these reports, and he was using them to target these vulnerable females and go and take advantage of them. And the girl that worked for me, that same one that was having the back and forth with the husband, she got pregnant. So I had suspicions because I had seen things. I'd seen them with each other and whatever. So that plus a bunch of other stuff, really fucked up stuff that that Lou, about some of this stuff, led me to file a report. After I filed it, though, they opened an NCIS, a criminal investigation. And the criminal investigator came and interviewed me and asked me if I had any knowledge of prostitution of this certain other individual and sale of drugs by the guy that I accused, and another guy. But it's just that stuff's everywhere. It's like it's. I think even in some of the military leadership stuff they talk about, they call it one of the conversations they have about is the Bathsheba syndrome and the King David. You know how he basically stole one of his top general's wives, and then sent the general off to war to die. Which was like in the Bible, that's part of the leading up to the fall of Jerusalem in the first place and all the corruption and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and people they don't want to accept that it's happening because if the person who's in charge of that unit, if they have something like that happening there, the questions and the stuff that they're going to get is like, why are you allowing this to happen under your watch? And then the same for his boss, and then the same for her boss, and then the same for his boss. So like, it's just all of them want to play this game of like minimizing and like hiding stuff like that, like really serious stuff, because they don't want to look bad like they failed in their leadership. So I figured that out through that process, that like there's the way that it's set up, the way that it's arranged, there's really not a good system of dealing with that kind of stuff. And to bring some closure to that whole thing, how that ended up was they split it into two parts. They split it one into like a toxic work environment, like hostile work environment, whatever they called it. They split it into two separate investigations. One was that for hostile work environment. The other was for that individual, like fraternization, they call it, where it's like, you're not supposed to be in a unduly familiar relationship with a subordinate or whatever it is. And the first one, the hostile work environment thing, they referred it back to the command to investigate themselves. So it's basically like it's like that's like telling like an abusive spouse to like, all right, here's the accusation against you. Are you guilty or not? Like, like the fuck is that? Oh, sorry. And then the second one, they agreed with my accusations, right, of this individual, but they referred the correction, the punishment, back to the command. So I don't know what happened, what they did to him. I think those two are like in a relationship now, or they're married, or so, I don't know. Which is like a whole other complicated, I'm not necessarily against people like finding their significant other at work or anything, but just the whole thing was just like full of structural problems, hierarchy based problems that they don't like ever really focus on fixing any of these systemic problems. There's been a lot of change in like the recruiting stuff and the standards and like the benefits they're giving people, but it's like once they get people in the military, they don't really do their best to take care of them, and empower them and, help them grow as people, young kids, it's just like you're expected to do your job. And if you can't do it, then it's like you're just get out of here. You don't belong here, and yeah, they don't give a shit. Yeah. Oh shit. I'm supposed to say that. But yeah, and it really just tanks morale. It's like, it's crazy. Imagine if your boss is like, messing around with some girl or some dude, and like they have favoritism for them or whatever, and it's like, what does that do to everybody else? It's like, I get that's why those rules are there, but just so many things like that. Like, what if, one of my things was always like, they always say like, oh, we're here till 1600, working hours is till whatever. But like, if so this is what I liked to do with my people, right? I would tell them like, okay, whenever all the work is done, we'll go. But it's funny because you get moved around so much. You go to a new place, right? So if I went to a new place and I had new, kind of, they got all these layers of like people that work for you, so there's like middle management in between me and the workers. So I'll tell my like, like junior manager people, I'll tell them like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. Whenever the work's done, we leave, but you guys need to put enough work on there for them to like work up to this time, whatever time we want to leave. Like maybe we want to leave, maybe not 1600, maybe 1530, maybe 1500. But you got to make sure to like give people enough to do, because the first time they do that, they'll like give them a list of stuff, and these kids will be done by like 10 o'clock. Like you can't keep them there after that. If you told them you're going to let them go, like let them go, or else you're going to ruin the trust factor. But, it's funny because they'll walk around all the time and be like, these kids are so lazy and they're so entitled and this new generation and all that shit. But if you actually do that, then they'll work their ass off and they'll do a really good job. Like they'll make stuff happen. But the reason that it gets screwed up is because you or me or whatever, us in the leadership position screw it up, by not doing what we say we're going to do with them. Or, like if you can't plan out a work list, to give people enough stuff to do to a certain time and like actually know how much they're capable of doing, like you got no business running a team of people. If you don't even know how much work they're capable of doing, it's like, it's insane. That should be one of your basic first things, is try to figure that out, right? Where should everyone, I got over, I got to pull from my engineering department because I'm a female who would be more useful in ops for admin. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. I remember that kind of. I mean, I don't remember your exact situation, but I remember that place. And I went to dinner with some guys a couple years ago who were from there, and they worked with you over in whatever that was, the builder shop or whatever. They worked in that same area, and they had one of the same bosses who's a somewhat of a friend of mine. He's and he was going through stuff, but they really had a lot to say about like how much they did not like working for that guy, and how he like treated them pretty badly and all that. But yeah, I feel like it's it's basically what we were talking about earlier. It's like a lot of it's emotional maturity stuff and like seeing the bigger picture stuff and whatever. And it's really hard too, to do a good job with that stuff when you're struggling yourself with your mental health stuff because your bosses are doing that stuff to you, So it's like this, just whatever that's saying, the shit rolls downhill. It's like that. Yeah, that's crazy to say like you need to be doing admin because you're a female. It's like that's pretty blatant. That's pretty blatant, yeah. I mean, I've heard, I don't know, there's just so much just dumb stuff in there. Um, should we shift gears and talk about military industrial complex stuff? I guess we could have started out with that when we were talking about the Pat Tillman stuff and everything. But I mean, I guess we kind of did touch on it, with the big picture view of kind of how, like, what they're using the military for. And man, you reported a senior chief for blatant racism to the triad, and they made him acting CMC. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so crazy.
I only had one success story. Like that whole Inspector General investigation that I launched, like it was a big disaster, and they ended up agreeing with you know, my claim, but they didn't do anything about it. But I did report a AWRC that we had at SAR school for religious discrimination because I was a career counselor, which basically, if there's non-military, non-Navy folks watching, like the career counselors, like you, I mean, it is what it sounds like. You give people like advice on and help them like navigate their career choices and they're like what's going to be their next duty station and do all the administrative side of that. But something that they have to do is in between. So the evaluation cycle's annual. So every 6 months they do a midterm evaluation. And this guy, I was on leave, so I was on vacation for 2 weeks while this guy did these midterm counselings with all the junior folks. And I was a E6 at the time. He was an E7 or maybe he was an E8. I think he was an E7, but whatever. There's a big divide there. Like once you get promoted to E7, it's like you're in a different world. But as an E6, I was a career counselor there. And so he gave me all the paperwork for all their like midterm counselings. And I was looking through them, like the notes that he wrote. Because you had to go on the computer and put in some stuff, whatever. And on one of the guys, he wrote, either get married or don't live together. So I went to the guy. This is a friend of mine, too. I knew him from the ship from before. I was like, hey, what is this, man? And he was like, oh, yeah, he said that. He said that to me. I was like, what did he say? He said, this is so funny how he said it. This is exactly how he said it. He was like, well, he was talking about, like religion stuff. He was like, I know we're both Christian, and I know you've been living with your girlfriend, and, well, you're Catholic. That's kind of like Christian. That part. And then he was like, just come on, man. With what we believe, like you guys shouldn't be living together. So I was like, oh yeah, all right, dude, I got this guy, man. So well, I sent it up to the Simio, who was in Pensacola, Florida at the time. We were here in San Diego, and I think he got in trouble for that. Like the CO flew out the next week, and they met with him and stuff. So yeah, it turned into a whole big thing. But for the most part, I think that's like the exception rather than the common thing you see. Like that doesn't usually happen. Usually they kind of just, oh, don't do that anymore, guy. But yeah, kind of before we did this stream, like when I was making the notes for it and everything, one of the things I wanted to bring up, that I was thinking about. In addition to the whole like portrayal of us as like these righteous protectors of freedom and defenders of the country and all that stuff, which is like kind of true in a way, but it's not like how you think. It's more of like on the world stage, what we're doing is more like we're just bullies, right? We're just like bullying everybody into like, give us your fucking lunch money. And like, I didn't like that. But also, I kind of was thinking about it like that's kind of like what Walmart did to everybody, right? Like it kind of goes hand in hand with like the economics and I really feel like it's the whole worldview. Let me see if I can pull up this quote, dude. This quote is so good. It's me and my mom were talking about this earlier this week. It's a guy who wrote. Wait. It's a guy who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I think was like from the 60s or 70s. Here, let me put this Do I have a window cap? Oh yeah, I do. Here. Is it not this one? Maybe not. Maybe I need to close the whole thing. Or just add a new one. All right, here we go. Got it. All right, so yeah, it's this one right here. To tear down a factory or revolt against a government, or to avoid repair of a motorcycle because it's a system, because it is a system, is to attack the effects rather than causes. And as long as the attack is upon the effects only, no change is possible. The true system, the real system, is our present construction of systematic thought itself, rationality itself. And if a factory is torn down but the rationality which produced it is left standing, then the rationality will simply produce another factory. If a revolution destroys a systematic government but the systematic patterns of thought that produce that government are left intact, then those patterns will repeat themselves in the succeeding government. There's so much to talk about the system and so little understanding. And I think this is true, like, because you can see these things reflected, like these problems that are in the military, these problems that are in corporations, these problems that are in the economics, these problems that are in like the imperialist program that the United States is carrying out against the rest of the world. And not just the United States, you know, the United States and allies. It's really the corporations, the multinational corporations that are controlling the government. You know, we've talked about that a lot in previous streams. It happened in the industrial era with the American industrialists, you know, the Vanderbilt, the Rockefeller, all that stuff, the J.P. Morgan. And then Teddy Roosevelt came in and did the trust busting and broke all that stuff up. But they just came back. You know, it crept in back, like slowly, but you know, like the whole Howard Hughes thing was part of that. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie Aviator. They talk about it a lot in there. Like his company is literally hiring teams of lawyers to write legislation for Congress to present to them, to say like, hey, pass this law. We already did all the work for you. You know? And they're still doing that. They're still doing that. They're doing it even more now. You know, that's like that's kind of their whole thing. But it slowly crept back in. But then after 2008, there was this huge consolidation of everything in the financial industry. And then, you know, that wasn't that long ago. That was like right after I joined the military and the Occupy movement and all that. And that led into like the Obama era and, you know, the rise of big tech. And then in COVID, it happened even more. You know, there was huge transfers of wealth and power from small business into big corporations. Yeah, exactly. So raise consciousness, exactly. That's what the whole developmental stuff and like this project's really all about, you know? It's like basically what he's saying, what you're saying, Sarah. Like, you know, the worldview has to change. The way we think about stuff has to change. Because even if we have a rebellion and like burn this mother to the ground, like, are we going to do a better job than we already did? Like, are we going to replace it with something better? And I think we even that was some of the criticisms that were happening during the, you know, the Black Lives Matter stuff and the, you know, what was that thing they did in, was it in Seattle or Portland? I think it was in Seattle, where they had that like autonomous zone for a little while. And they were trying to like make people pay reparations. Like if you lived there and you were white, you had to, you know, donate. You had to give money to black people or something, like whatever it was. Like they were just doing all this like I mean, not that that's like a terrible thing in and of itself, but it was just like it seemed very like angry, you know, and like people were being like bullied and ridiculed and like, you know, I just hate that whole identity politics stuff. That whole, you know, like you don't deserve to have an opinion on something because you're like of this, you know, you're a man or you're white or you're, you know, whatever. It's like the what do they call it, reverse racism stuff. Like, I get the whole affirmative action thing. I'm not taking like a hard stance against it and saying that like, oh no, it's all bullshit. Like, I get the point. You know, that was part of like what we did in our ethics stuff when I was in college, was a lot of affirmative action theory and all that, and like helping disadvantaged people get back on their feet and like reintegrated into society and those kind of things, like addiction programs and those kind of things. But you know, so I know there's like some nuance there, but that's kind of what they talk about in the developmentalist stuff. You know, in integral theory, all the stuff we always talk about a lot. Yeah. Oh shoot, what did I do here? But I feel like I bring this up almost every stream now, because I really like this is Steve McIntosh that does this stuff, and I really like his, like, how simple he makes it. Let me put this down a little bit so it's not covering me up. Like, this thing is really short. You know, you could just like check this out, you know, whenever, but so instead of, whereas like spiral dynamics and integral theory, they separate things into a lot more categories, he makes it really simple and he gives us only 3. So he says like most of people are in modernist worldview. Traditionalist is more like religious, kind of, you know, old school. And then progressive is that more like most of leftists are in this progressive sphere. And none of this is like anti any of these, right? It's not like these ones are the wrong ones, these ones are the wrong ones. What it really is saying is that like all of these are right about something, and they're all wrong about something too. You know, they all have their like pitfalls, and that's kind of what he talks about here. But this whole idea, right, is about this developmentalist view is about raising consciousness, like moving people through these spheres into the developmentalist worldview, which is not like morally superior or like you're not a better person per se, or you're not, you know, more enlightened or something. I mean, maybe you are, but like it's not like meant to be like a evaluation thing or like a because that's what these people do, right? These traditionalists are like, well, our view is better. Modernists are like, our view is better. Progressives think their view is better. So there's this like rejection of each other. And what developmentalism or integral politics is all about, what the whole thing, because integral politics, spiral dynamics, is all in the same wheelhouse. It's the same idea with different names and different, you know, emphasis and you know, whatever. But this is really simple way to look at it and say that this kind of social, cultural intelligence of looking at people going through these cultures and societies going through these developmental phases, or not even like societies as a whole, but, you know, segments of society also, and individuals. It's like goes down to individual level, but really it's focusing more on like how to honor and include all of these groups in conversation and see the good parts of them and try to get them to acknowledge the shortcomings of each, you know, which they all have, right? And kind of move forward into like a new synthesis of this new thing that that's been emerging for a while. So one thing that this guy likes to talk about a lot too, that's different than some of the other integral stuff and the spiral dynamics, is that in the United States specifically, the culture has moved so far past traditionalism, and that's why there's a lot of embrace of that stuff now, like people wanting to like revert back to that, is because if you look at it like that, like a pyramid kind of like it's, you need a foundation. So you need like a foundation of community and like following rules and those kind of things to be able to have modernity and this modernist worldview be stable. And we don't have that because we're just so entrenched in this. And then, this is basically just attacking modernism and saying like, okay, all these, so traditionalism as a worldview is like really focused on maintaining the integrity of the community, like be it a religious community or whatever, but it's like that small, like we got to look out for each other and keep ourselves safe from like the outside shit. And we do that by following these rules. That's really the big thing with them is like rules. Modernism is more like, okay, how do we like, it's more of like a scientific, like super rationalist worldview, but it's more individual focused. And it's like this, it's more of like this, like, if you're smart enough and you figured out how the world works enough, you deserve to like be rewarded for that. And you as much money as you can make, like that's fine. And, it all like works out in the end, because like liberal democracy and like super emphasis on freedom and individual autonomy is pretty much what the modernist worldview is. But it's led to like a lot of, they talk about it here, I think. No, that's traditionally like environmental degradation and like these arms races and all that stuff. So that's like comes out of that worldview. And then postmodernism attacks that, and they're emphasizing these things, which all these things are important, right? But like these are the pitfalls. So to fix the outside world, yeah, for sure. That's really like, I even feel like a lot of the traditionalists, like as much as I'm not as much as I can like find fault in Jordan Peterson, that he talks a lot about those kind of things. He's not the first one, like people like have been talking about that forever. Like Stoicism's about that, like Buddhism is a lot about that. But I really do feel like that's the truth. Like we have to focus on doing that, but we can't just like focus on doing it only as individuals ourselves. Like, that's part of it. We have to do that. But I really feel like we have to form community around that idea, like healing each other and healing ourselves and like, developing ourselves and growing ourselves. And like creating culture that's conducive to that. And it's kind of really the critique I was giving of the military itself. It's not conducive to that at all. Even though like in some ways it tries to be. It tries to like have these little programs where it's like, oh, you can do this thing and that'll like, teach you to be a better leader or whatever. But all in all, like it's missing something. It's missing like that focus on it, yeah. For sure. Yeah. Something that I've been thinking about and I'm going to do this week is, one of the things like really that I've been missing for a long time, I think, talking about like healing and personal development and growth and everything, is I even remember so long ago, like I always loved to read. I was always like very studious and, figuring out like dinosaurs and space when I was like a little kid, But I did a seminar when I was a teenager. I was probably like 19, maybe 18 or 19. And we had to do this little presentation. And I can't remember what it was about. Maybe we even picked our own topic. But, we were in small groups, probably like maybe 6 or 8 people. And the leader was
giving people feedback on, it wasn't like a public speaking thing. It was, it was a whole thing. It was like the whole seminar thing was about personal development and growth stuff. But the guy, so I did my presentation, right? And I was like, okay, you guys, what I do. I'm like, okay, you got to get this. This is very important. Like, please listen, and whatever. Like, and I didn't say those things, but that was my that's my attitude. It's like, I did all this work to get all this information for you guys, so like it's very important that you pay attention to it and you get this, because like this, everything depends on you understanding what I'm saying right now. So that's like kind of the approach I was taking to it. So I said the thing, I read the thing, or whatever we had to do. And the guy said, this was his feedback to me. I remember it like so vividly, that he said, I can tell that you know a lot about what you're talking about and that you care about it a lot. But I feel like you just told me that somebody just died. And I thought that was like, it was so good. Just like, it was so perfect the way he said it. Because he was like, we talked about it for a little bit, and then he was like, all right, I want you to do it again. But he was like, what's something you really love to do? And I told him, something, whatever. I think it was, at the time, I was really big into breakdancing, and I told him, I like to breakdance. He was like, all right, I want you to do it again, but this time I want you to pretend that you're breakdancing while you do it. And I can't believe I forgot about that for all these years, because that was so wise of him. Like that element of like play and like fun and enjoyment and like lightheartedness is so, I don't know. I don't want to say important, because it's not like that. That's kind of the opposite. It's like ruins it. There's this quote too. My brother. Oh shoot! I don't know if I can bring this thing up again like this, but yeah, I think I have to add a new one every time. But anyways, I can just read it. One of my brother's favorite quotes is this quote from Nietzsche, where he says, see if I can find it on Goodreads. I don't want to misquote him. He says, a man's maturity, to have regained the seriousness that he had as a child at play. I love that. I think it's so perfect, like how he kind of juxtaposes seriousness and play. Because it's like, that's how kids are. It's like, it's very serious, but it's also like for fun. And I feel like that's been a big missing for me, in a lot of the work that I've been doing, and and it's like a turnoff for a lot of people. So I feel like that's a big part of our project that we're doing here. Any institution that provides the opportunity for power is going to find itself overwhelmed with people who care about power. Yeah, that's true. I think that was an Abraham Lincoln thing that he said, right? I don't know if that was originally his quote, or it might even be misattributed, but like, if you want to test somebody's character, give them power. We've talked about that before, right? With the whole Cincinnatus thing. That's something we should talk about, like the esoterica stuff, and how the like history of our society ties like into some of these like secret societies and like cults and weird shit. I bet the fucking MAGA people would love that too, man. They'd love that shit. Fucking, like, did you know the national anthem, the music for the national anthem was not written by Francis Scott Key? It was it was a drinking song of a secret society from England. It was all about like drinking wine and partying. But the reason I brought all that up is, do you know, did we talk about this before, Alexandria? Do you know why the city of Cincinnati is named Cincinnati? I've been trying to mix this up, man, and it's just not happening. It was actually started by a secret society called the Society of the Cincinnatus. And this dude was like he was, it seems like a lot of the founding fathers knew about him, if not, put him on some kind of pedestal, because he is referred to throughout history as like an example of leadership. Because in the Roman Republic pre-Roman Empire, this guy, Cincinnatus, he was a statesman, a senator, who was retired, and he was living on a farm, and they had like some kind of revolt, uprising, or some kind of crisis that they were facing. And they wanted to go to him because they were like, he'll know what to do. He's kind of a badass. He's a really smart guy, and he'll have all the answers. He's like, we need to go to him. So they did. And they basically told him hey, we'll give you absolute Emperor Palpatine level power, control over everything. If you can fix this problem. So he was like, all right. And he took the power and he solved the problem. And then he kind of just was like, all right, I'm going back to the farm, you guys. And he gave the government back to him. So he could have become the emperor at that point, basically, but he didn't. So actually the reason that we have term limits, presidential term limits, it wasn't part of the Constitution originally. They didn't turn it into law, I think until the 19th century, but I'm not sure the exact date, but it started as a tradition because George Washington, after 2 terms, stepped down and said he wants to let somebody else do it, because they would have just kept electing him. But he was supposedly inspired by that guy, so that's why he did. Hey, yeah. We should cover some of that stuff one of these days, all that weird history. Y'all should look up that song though, the origins of the national anthem. Also, the original poem of the national anthem, it's only the first verse. Me and Alondra were talking about this yesterday, actually. It's only the first verse, but the third verse. It's something for the defense of Fort McHenry, I think is the name of the poem. Still trying to find it. Defense of Fort McHenry. Oh yeah, I found it. As I could bring it up here, you guys can see it. You know what? Let me just add the whole. Wait. Oh no, that's not gonna work. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. There it goes. Okay, here's the first verse that everybody knows, the national anthem. Yeah. Wait, this is the one I was telling you about, I think. Yeah. So, and where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps, pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave. He's literally talking about slavery and indentured servitude in the poem. And I don't know, I just think that's crazy that's the origins of our country and nobody even knows about it or talks about it. I mean, a lot of people do, but this specifically.
Like, it's made to be this kind of like, it's kind of a good, I guess, wrap up point for all this whole thing we're talking about, because it's kind of a good like mirror of what we were saying the military actually is, you know, because it's like it's presented as this like very patriotic, you know, we're the good guys kind of thing. But, you know, if you just like peek behind the curtain a little bit, you can see all this shady, like evil shit that's going on. And, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, y'all. Thanks for coming and hanging out and chat with me. And if you're not on the group, here, I'll post it in the chat too, so you guys have it. I think everybody here is in the group, but I'll post it in the chat. Because I'll put a poll on there, or, you know, we can just talk about it in the group, like what we want to do next week. But yeah, sweet. Appreciate you guys. Guys and girls. I'm gonna make a toast to you with my protein drink. Yeah, I'll hopefully I'll see you next week. Have a good night, everybody.